Good afternoon. Welcome to our special board meeting on the 26th of September for the financial statements and single audit results. Before we get started, I don't think there are any public comment. No one signed up. If you would please stand for a moment of silence, followed by a pledge of allegiance. I would also like to remind you that one of our board members, Mr. Goffey, lost his sister in the last couple of weeks, Joan Johnson, and certainly our prayers go to, what, pardon me? Sussman, I'm sorry. Last couple of weeks, and certainly our thoughts and prayers go out to you and your family. Also like to remind everybody to remember Florida. It looks like they're going to have an incredible hurricane that hits there tonight, so we certainly ask each of you to remember those in your thoughts and prayers as well. Okay, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
So moved by Jason,
Second.
seconded by Sadie. All those in favor of the agenda as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And the agenda is approved. Ms. Smith, I'll let you have any introductory remarks, introduce someone that's here with us from the Rodehaver Group, and we'll get on with the business at hand.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here to present the fiscal year 2024 annual financial report to the board. In addition, Mr. Stickle is here with the Rodehaver Group to present the results of the audit engagement. As you know, the state of Maryland requires that LEAs publish a complete set of financial statements at the close of every year, and it needs to be in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles and audited following generally accepted auditing standards by a firm of licensed CPAs. In compliance with that requirement, the Finance Department published this report, which is a thorough and detailed presentation of the system's financial position, activities, and balances at the end of fiscal 24. The report was prepared pursuant to Education Article Section 5-109 of the Annotated Code of Maryland. The report consists of management's representations regarding the finances of the school system. Management is responsible for the completeness and reliability of that information. And that is based on our internal controls that we use to ensure the integrity of the financial information that we present and to ensure that it's free of any material misstatements. And as management, we assert that to the best of our knowledge and belief that these financial statements are reliable in all material aspects. Financial statements have been audited by the Rodehaver Group, who is an independent firm of licensed public accountants. And the independent auditor's report, which Mr. Stickle will present, is located at the front of your financial report. We're also required to undergo a federally mandated single audit to meet special needs of the federal grantor agencies. In addition to presenting the fair presentation of the financial statement, it also puts additional emphasis on internal controls and the legal requirements involved when we receive federal funding. The single audit this year was our food and nutrition services, and that is available separately from this report. Single audit was certified by the auditors and me, and it was uploaded to the federal clearinghouse this morning. So the preparation of this report, I would like to say, could not have been accomplished without the skills and the dedication of the entire finance department and of the Rodehaver Group. The work took many long days, late nights, and weekends, and I'm just amazed and pleased that with everything else that was going on that had an impact on the finance department this year, that we were 4 days ahead of last year's audit, which just still amazes me. And I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize Dr. McCartney and the board for your support and dedication in the fiscal management of GCPS. So thank you for that. So I'll now turn it over to Mr. Stickle to present the audit report.
I would simply say before Mr. Sickle starts, if you have questions, certainly, you need to ask those questions as he goes through the report. If we wait till the end, you see how old all of us are. We'll forget the question.
Okay, thank you. Before I go over the report, I just want to echo the sentiments of Gloria. I came from West Virginia. I retired in 2021. I ran a local audit division for the state of West Virginia for 21 years. And we audited boards of education, counties, cities. To get an audit issued within 90 days of the end of the fiscal year is somewhat incredible. And it's not an easy task. I can tell you it doesn't happen in any governments in West Virginia. 30 days, that means that the staff has to have the trial balances closed out shortly after the end of the year by August. And, honestly, this is my 4th year around, and there's been some changes here at the Board of Education. So obviously we were apprehensive, and I just want to thank Dr. McCartney and Gloria and her staff. They did a wonderful job, and it's not easy. I mean, when we're preparing these audit reports, if you read them pretty close, it's not simple stuff. I mean, the fund activity is complicated, the government-wide activity is complicated, and I can tell you that in going through this for the past 90 days, everything went fine, and we got nothing but cooperation from everybody. So I want to thank you for that before we go over the report. So page 1. No, I'm just kidding. I wouldn't do that to you. Well, I honestly, when you look at these two reports, the financial information is all of the boards of education. We help them prepare that, but that's not ours. There's 3 reports and 1 letter that we technically approve, so that's what I'm going to go over. The first report is on the big book, the first page, Independent Auditors Report. This is the report that you would get in the private sector, public sector. This is an opinion on the financial statements. So the financial statements are basically 90% of what you see in this report. The notes to the financial statements, all the statements you see up front. I'm not going to read the opinion. I mean, there's different opinions you can get. You can get unmodified, which is good. You can get modified, which is not as good. You can get adverse, which is bad. And you can get a disclaimer, which is no opinion, which is also very bad. And I can tell you over my career, I've issued every one of them. But I'm glad to say that this was an unmodified opinion, a pretty standard opinion. We didn't find any matters that rose to the level of us having to report it. The only thing that you'll see in there a little bit different, on the first page, you'll see an emphasis of matter related to a change in accounting principle. And that's related to the Governmental Accounting Standard Board, which promulgates accounting standards for local governments and state governments. They came out with a question and answer that essentially said group asset purchases need to be capitalized. Now, what that means is you have a threshold for capitalization for capital assets. I think here it's $5,000. But so previously, like if you go out and you buy 150 computers and each computer is under $5,000, you don't capitalize it. In other words, you don't make it part of your capital assets and depreciate it. The question and answer from the Governmental Accounting Standards Board said that you do need to capitalize those. So that's an emphasis of the matter, and you'll see, I think in note 10, I don't know what page it's on, but you'll see a prior period adjustment related to that of approximately, well, it's $510,605 that we increased your fund balance from the prior year to retroactively recognize assets that Gloria and her staff had identified as group purchases in prior years. And it's primarily computers.
Yes.
So that's something that is going to be an additional burden on the accounting staff to track those assets because they've got to be aggregated. So GASB, it's a Governmental Accounting Standards Board, but I've heard people say it should stand for Get Me Another Strong Beverage. Because the fact of the matter is the standards in subscription-based information technology. I know Gloria and I dealt with that. There's a lot of standards that they put out there that you're saying, what are they thinking? And this was one of them where, is it really that important to create this burden on people to track this type of stuff? Because the fact of the matter is, even with the subscription-based licenses for technology, I mean, what's next? Are we going to start capitalizing electricity payments? I mean, because that's pretty much what they're saying. To me, subscriptions are an expense. And now they're saying it's not, it's a liability and an asset. So I don't always agree with what Gatsby says, but unfortunately, when I talk to clients, they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I didn't do it. But we do have to follow that. So as far as this opinion is, this was a clean opinion. So are there any questions on that? So the rest of this report is all financial information. I mean, the notes to the financial statement, I always tell people, if you really want to know what's going on, read the notes, because that'll tell you a lot. The next thing I'm going to go over is in the little report. This is the single audit report, and this will contain 2 auditor letters in it. The first one's the report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance. So what this has to do with is when we're doing the financial audit, which is the audit opinion I just went over, we're also looking at the internal control structure of the Board of Education. And the internal control is related with what safeguards are in place to ensure the accuracy of the financial information that we're auditing. So we do tests of controls, we do inquiry, we do observation. And if anything rises, if we see a weakness in internal control, we would report it in this letter. Like a common example is segregation of duties. If you don't segregate your duties among your accounting staff properly or something like that. Also in this report, we look for any material compliance issues that need to be checked for the Board of Education. And I can tell you, there's not a lot of compliance issues that, if violated, would have a material effect on the financial statements outside of the single audit, which is a separate report. Typically, when we're checking things related to compliance for governments, it's debt covenants, like on bonds that are issued and things like that, and that does not apply to the Board of Education. So there isn't a lot to look at on compliance for financial statements for the board. That said, we didn't have any compliance finding, and more importantly, we didn't have any internal control findings. Nothing rose to the level. Any audit you go through, there's discussion points, but nothing rose to the point where we felt anything needed to be reported, as in the past. That the internal control structure was fine. This is a standard letter. It's 2 pages, so if you're bored and you need some sleep, go ahead and read it. So the next report, and this is probably the most important report outside of the audit opinion, and this relates to your federal programs. Obviously, at Board of Education, you have a lot of federal programs. If you go forward a little bit past the letter, you'll see a schedule in there that has a bunch of numbers in it right here. Then that lists every federal expenditure that the Board of Education did for the fiscal year 24. So as auditors, we follow guidelines set by the Office of Management and Budget of the federal government that establish auditing standards related to federal programs. And we actually do a compliance audit on the federal programs, but not everyone, not every single program. If we did every single program, we would be here for 1.5 years, given the regulations that we have to follow, the auditing regulations that we follow for the federal government. The one program, so what we do is any program over $750,000, we have to analyze and apply this criteria to see if we're going to have to test it. Long story short, we only had one program that we tested this year, and that was the child nutrition cluster, which comprised 22% of the federal expenditures of the Board of Ed. And the only reason we are able to do that is because the board is considered a low-risk auditee. So a low-risk auditee, you have to get at least 20% of the total federal expenditures. If you're high risk, you'd have to be 40%. So we would have had to pick additional programs. The way you become low risk is just some of the things that I just talked about, not having internal control findings and having unmodified opinions. So it's a good thing to be low risk because technically, I mean, if we have to audit more programs, our cost goes up. So, well, it does go up. So The one program we did was the child nutrition cluster, and Dylan's not here. My staff kind of got laid up this week with illness, so he did all the work. But I did talk to him, and he said everything just went great. I mean, there was no problem. Scott, he dealt with Scott and Robin and Gloria's staff, and there were no problems at all with that. And I reviewed it, and everything looked really good. So, any questions on the single audit? Okay, last thing is just this 2-page thing, and this is a boilerplate letter that we were required to issue at the end of every audit to those charged with governments, so that's you guys. And basically, it's just a lot of the stuff we've already talked about, and it's just in a summary form and a lot shorter document than the audit reports. It does allude to the change in the emphasis of the matter for the group assets. And it also identifies significant accounting estimates that the board makes in conjunction with the preparation of the financial statements. And you know, primarily we're talking about the net OPEB liability and the actuarial assumptions that the actuary employs in estimating that liability. Because the actuary is technically working for management. They're considered to be a management specialist, and we rely on their work to actually assist in getting those figures into the audit report. And you'll see in the notes, and you'll see on the financial statements, there is a pretty significant OPEB liability that's calculated, and that's what we're kind of alluding to there, because that's an estimate. You're estimating how much you'll have to pay for that in the future.
And that's sort of been an ongoing conversation we've had the past few years, is our OPEB liability. So you are of a belief that we are within the parameters that we need to be be solvent with that, to be somewhat solvent. We're never going to be solvent, obviously.
Well, I don't know where the other boards have had in this. I mean, it's all relative, right?
Yes, right.
You know, it's like whether you decide to fund that or not, that's an executive decision. Like if you want to pre-fund it, right now you're not. I mean, not a lot. There's some assets in there, but it's not. You know, the liability, but the fund. If I'm not mistaken, it's closed, right? Like the plan itself's closed. Oh, it's not. Okay.
No.
We did and change the plan going forward, which I would expect, Gloria and I talked about that earlier today, will be a part of next year's audit report, so that new employees starting this current year, we have limited when they become eligible. They are eligible until they begin receiving Medicare. And then they're no longer eligible. So we're looking towards that in future years, limiting our liability.
Yeah,
Did I get that right, Jane? Dr. Wilderson, sorry.
Yeah, and something like that will have a vast effect on that. I mean, you'll see the effect of that probably almost immediately. Because the actuaries, when they come in to project that liability, they are looking at what they expect you to pay all the way down the line for all your current employees. So a change like that would probably have a significant impact on the liability. And honestly, the reason why the OPEB liability and the pension liability are there, you know, they weren't there if you go back 15 years. They weren't required by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. And you wonder what drives those standards, and it's generally the bond rating companies, because they want to see those figures, because the governments are so active in the bond market. And when like if the state of Maryland issues bonds, one of the first things they're going to look at is the funding percentage of their pension and OPEB plans to see if they're funded. For, like, I know in West Virginia, believe it or not, they're over 100% funded in their cost sharing plans, and I think Maryland and their cost sharing plan for the pension plan, it's like 73%. So those are the people that drive these complicated standards, are generally the people that are rating bonds. So that's kind of where it comes from. And you're not in the bond market either. So, okay. And then the other estimate, significant, and we talked a little bit about the subscription-based information technology arrangements, and that's another estimate that we looked at. And honestly, that estimate was more from the prior audit. When Allison was here, she worked on that estimate. What I had to do as an auditor is test that estimate in the current year to make sure it was still accurate or reliable, and we didn't have any problems with it. That's something that I spoke with Gloria about, just moving forward, that it's something that we probably need to keep an eye on, because it's a tricky thing to record. So we're gonna work together on that, and I think it'll be fine in the future. But honestly, that particular statement is the worst statement I've ever seen in my life. I mean, that GASB put out, but unfortunately, you got to follow it. The rest of these is it just basically says if there were any audit findings, there weren't any disagreements with management. No, I don't think we have any, right? So, and then the rest of it's just some of the stuff that we reported on and the required supplementary information. You know, this would have a lot more in it if there was more in the audit opinions and more findings, but overall, the audit went really well.
Questions, comments, anyone?
Just a comment, and you've already answered the question I was going to ask was, were we cooperative as far as during the audit process? And you've already answered that. So just thank you to the finance staff. I know it was a lot of work. Thank you to the Rhoda Heaver Group for the work that you put into this audit.
Yeah, great job, everyone. I know what other counties are doing in Maryland, and we are. I think we're doing real well in comparison. Just as far as timelines and everything. I mean,
Yes.
I was remiss in saying that one of our board members, Mr. Moran's not here today. He was unable to attend the live session. I think he's perhaps going to follow it as a recording. He would be our financial expert. That would tell us what we think about everything. So we'll rely on him. But Gloria, again, I'll echo the sentiments of all of us. I find it actually amazing that you're able to do this, given the fact that you've never been in education in terms of doing budgeting work and those kinds of things. So kudos to you particularly, and to your staff for everything that they have done. So
Thank you.
yeah, we're very, very fortunate to have you.
May I add something?
You sure may.
Because I don't know that we're going to go through and highlight our management discussion and analysis tonight, but I would urge the board members to read that section of the report. That is put together by Mrs. Smith as she has been looking at the finance office. And I found it a very good read on explaining the numbers and where we are as a system. And hopefully as the board members read it, you will also celebrate where we are as far as our fund balance at this point. And also I would urge everyone to understand that part of that fund balance, when you look at it, it's a nice number, but we were able to bring that fund balance forward because of the work of a lot of people, as we were leaving our dependence on some federal monies and trying to think forward to next year as we have negotiated agreements to meet. The fund balance, I just want everyone to understand, we have strategic plans for that going forward, and we'll be discussing that in more detail with the board once we've had an opportunity to sit down and really look at it carefully. So, but I thought the management discussion and analysis when I read it was very edifying and very well done. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Mr. Tickle, thank you very much for your assessment of our system. We're certainly all extremely pleased with your assessment. And I'm sure that we'll find a way to spend the fund balance wisely. Okay. And maybe add to it. Yeah, that'd be great too. Okay, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So move, Rodney.
Wait, we got to approve the audit.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. We got to.
I retract.
I'll take a motion to approve the audit then.
So
I can
moved.
do that. Second.
So moved by Jason, seconded by Rodney. Discussions about the audit. Hearing none. Those in favor of the audit as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And it is unanimous. Thank you. Now I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved by Jason,
Second.
seconded by Sadie. All those in favor of adjourning, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And we are adjourned.